Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful day so far. In today's edition of Solving Your Problems, I take a look at the implications of the Double Game Week 24 announcements, some differential captaincy shouts, as well as the captaincy shout between the three primary candidates. I look at whether you should be selling some midfielders for some others, and of course, solving benching dilemmas, amongst a whole host of other things. We have surpassed 6,000 subscribers, and for that, I am very grateful. But now we look to hit 7,000 subscribers. If you are new around here, or if you're a regular viewer who has not subscribed, which there are quite literally thousands of you, then consider doing so. I would be greatly appreciative. Drop a like on the video if you enjoy, and without nothing else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. The first rescheduled fixture of the Premier League season in the form of Everton versus Liverpool has been placed in Game Week 24, thereby turning it into a double, and it means that we shall not have double Game Week 25, at least courtesy of Everton and Liverpool. For those without a triple captainship, I would say this appears to be a win, because on the surface, it looked as if Wolves at home, in comparison to Bournemouth away, was a better fixture for Mohamed Salah. Thus, you would probably prefer the double to fall in 25 and then play the triple captainship there, should you still hold it. So, for those of you who don't have it, I would say this appears to be a win. There are 3 double game weeks that look to be occurring this season. Double game week 24, 33, and 36. And within each of those, it seems optimal to play a chip, the bench boost, assistant manager, and triple captain. However, the bench boost is very much restricted to being played in 33 or 36, because realistically, when you play it to maximize your upside, you want 15 doubles. Okay, maybe 14, maybe even 13, but nothing less than that. However, the maximum you could have is 6 if you were to play it in double game week 24, and you would block yourself from playing either of the other 2 chips, which means that really, the double game week 24, we must play one of the assistant manager or triple captainship on the assumption you have both left. My personal preference for the assistant manager chip is to definitely play it in a set of game weeks where I can attack that 5-team rule, where I can open myself up to that upside and really profit from the chip, because it is so powerful. I mean, an extra 10 points for winning, even an extra 5 for drawing, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. So that's my preference, and I'm hoping that some of those opportunities develop down the line, albeit at the moment it doesn't seem super likely, but I'm sure something will present itself. So I think whilst it is not the most exciting, whilst the 2 fixtures aren't particularly great for Salah, he is still the greatest, still the best right winger in the, not just in the league, but in the world, and he's in red hot form, right? At least at the moment. So playing it in 24, almost getting the triple captainship out of the way, and realistically over 2 fixtures, specifically them being Bournemouth away, Everton away, it's not like it's Arsenal away and Arsenal away, and it's Arsenal where it's very difficult to break them down. It's not that. And as such, I think it's better just to play the triple captain and almost get it out of the way. So that's where I'm leaning at the moment. But you would also likely want to have an optimal triple up of Liverpool, but not just for 24, because they've got Ipswich at home and Wolves at home either side of that double. And I think for that 4-game span, it really makes sense to have triple Liverpool and what you deem to be the best triple Liverpool within your side. So I would be planning for that, and I would be prioritizing that over the likes of bringing in someone like Eze or Bruno this week to maximize your upside for this particular week. Because not only are you making a transfer, but you could also potentially be indirectly blocking one of those Liverpool players by making that type of move. So what is the optimal Liverpool trio that we should be planning for and then adjusting our teams to? Well, obviously, this is going to be slightly subjective. Some people will like Alisson, Konate, someone like Diaz or Gakpo. For me, right now, albeit it's somewhat close, I prefer Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold. I can see Liverpool getting some clean sheets out of those 4 games. I can see attacking returns there for both of them, potentially. And across that 4-game span, I basically have 8 chances to hit an attacking return, and I think that should happen, right? I think that should happen, especially if they're playing well and they're up to scratch. The schedule isn't brilliant for them, but I am hoping that they could get some rest. At least Trent could get some rest if they have the UCL pretty much all wrapped up going into match day 8, specifically that number 1 position. And Van Dijk is pretty much, he seems to be somewhat injury proof. Obviously, he had that one really bad injury, but otherwise he's always available. And in terms of minutes, it doesn't really seem to affect him too much. So that's my preference. Konate, I think, is fine if you are willing to gamble that maybe he missed 1 fixture. He doesn't have that bad of an attacking threat. And for some reason, the UCL, it's always a greater demonstration of box threat. I still think it's decent there. Alisson, personally, I wouldn't. I think, for me, the optimal structure always resides with going with a cheaper goalkeeper, Sanchez, a Sales, a Henderson. albeit Henderson's slightly awkward now, blank gaming 29, unless you have another keeper who can play in that week. So yeah, for me, it's Van Dijk and Trent. And the reason I'm not going Diaz is expected minutes. That's fairly self-explanatory. Gakpo is also expected minutes. You expect it to be slightly better than Diaz is. And his form's better as well. But still, for me, I'm taking the minutes in Trent and Van Dijk and the upside associated with them. The second thing people will ask is in relation to Everton assets. Now, I could get on board with this more if the fixtures after double were particularly pleasing, but I don't think they really are, right? I don't think they're that easy. They involve or include Palace away, they include Man United and Brentford away. That's just not really my cup of tea for Everton, at least. I also don't think they'll necessarily be as good of a defensive side because they have lost one of the better defensive coaches in the league in Sean Dyche. And the other thing is their assets aren't particularly high ceiling ones. Maybe outside of Jordan Pickford, you could argue like a Tarkowski or a Branthwaite scoring a header from a corner. They don't have huge ceilings attached to them. Their first fixture, Leicester at home, looks attractive, but Leicester have a good attack, right? And they have a manager who's definitely not playing a style that was similar to Steve Cooper. It's more attacking in nature. But between Vardy, Elkanous, Mavididi, and some others, they've definitely got enough firepower, in my opinion, to cause Everton some problems. And you're not really expecting Everton to do a job on Liverpool. Okay, fine, they might get a point, but that would be better for the assistant manager chip as opposed to picking an asset. So for me, I personally would avoid him. I think the fact that you have to transfer them in, transfer them out, is really going to hurt you down the line, or at least indirectly in the immediate term. So that's my outlook on Double Game Week 24, and I really do think it should be planned for, and you should be willing to sacrifice a few opportunities now in order to arrive at 24 in a very optimal condition, and then also afterwards be in a somewhat optimal condition as well, because I simply more upside held in 24 and onwards. Moving on to captaincy. In everything you need to know, I expressed how Cole Palmer was certainly my preference for the armband this week. That very much remains the case, but I would say I'm even more confident in the fact that he's the best option. Now, of course, this is a subjective matter, and you may very well think, and justifiably so, that Alexander Isak or Mohamed Salah are a better option. And I'm just looking at the primary captaincy candidates, right? Because these three are quite far ahead, at least in the polls and in terms of effective ownership compared to the rest. However, in my opinion, I do think that Cole Palmer is, for me, the best, and there's a sizable or somewhat sizable gap between him and second place right now. Let's start with Isak. There are a lot of things I don't like about this Isak captaincy at the moment. One, he wasn't in the squad for the FA Cup game, so he must be nursing some sort of injury, especially considering the time at which he came off against Arsenal and the game state in that moment. There's also no Callum Wilson waiting to take his place and give them maybe not a like-for-like replacement, and maybe not a like-for-like replacement in terms of quality, but still a very good striker. They don't have that at the moment. So to lose him would be a huge blow, and thus I don't think Eddie Howe is going to over-risk his minutes within one game, especially when it's not a super vital game or one where you expect very much needed to get them over the line. They should be able to get the job done, even if he starts and plays 60 minutes, right? And they have the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday, so that's a tight turnaround, which I think will be in the back of Eddie Howe's mind. So for all of those reasons, I think you can somewhat safely expect slightly reduced minutes for Alexander Isak against Wolves. Then, on top of the analysis that was done in everything you need to know about why I don't think this is the best matchup for him, or why him being a forward in this particular case against Salah and Palmer is the best thing for him, when you put all of that together, I really find it difficult to justify the captaincy for Alexander Isak, and it's why I think Cole Palmer's somewhat significantly ahead of him. And my view on Salah very much remains the same. I basically just wanted to say that I've gone up a little bit on Palmer and down a little bit on Isak. My view on Salah very much remains the same. I think it'll be tough for Liverpool, irrespective of whether Forest play a 4 or a 5 at the back. I'd say it would probably be tougher if they play a 5 at the back, because I don't think they'll do what they did at Anfield, in the sense that they'll play like 4 central midfielders in midfield and have no traditional wingers. I do think like 1 or 2 of Callum Hudson-Odoi and Anthony will start. And as such, it should be a little bit easier in terms of that dynamic compared to Anfield. But it's at the Forest ground this time around, right? And you never know, maybe this is the time for a slight downturn for Liverpool. I think everyone had their view that they probably wouldn't keep the level up throughout the season. It's very difficult to do so with the volume of games, right? They have to play so much football. I think even from a physical standpoint, it's just hard to keep it up. So can't really blame them. And when there's so many good things about the Cole Palmer captaincy, in my opinion, all of which was discussed on Everything You Need to Know, which you can go and check out, I just think it makes sense to go Palmer captaincy, and it's not too difficult a decision. I've obviously gone Cole twice in the last 2 game weeks, and I would say this is the easiest I found it to go there. So yeah, I just wanted to express my confidence in him, and regardless of outcome, I do genuinely think he's the best captain by a little bit at least. Quite a few of you asked me to discuss 2 differential captains in particular, so here I am. As a starting point, obviously, I wouldn't be going for either, and I would not recommend going for either because I am much higher on the Cole Palmer captaincy. However, let's just assume that you don't like Palmer and you don't like Salah and Isak either. How do I see these 2 captains in isolation? I do think that with Bruno Fernandes, there is, of course, upside associated because 1, he's a wonderful, magnificent player, and 2, Southampton at home is arguably the best fixture you have at the moment on paper. However, even though United have performed very well against Arsenal and Liverpool, those are 2 very good defensive performances. And in terms of their attack, yes, they look threatening, but far more so in a sense where they're looking to counter-attack on teams and really leveraging their transitional threat. And it's a different type of avenue to goals, right? Just look at the goal Bruno Fernandes scored against Arsenal. That type of goal probably isn't going to happen against Southampton, albeit it was wonderfully well taken. Okay. Against sides that make Manchester United or United take it upon themselves to be the sides to take it to the other team and force it, they haven't had probably a single good performance against that type of side under Ruben Amorim. So you are walking into this Southampton when they are going to present you with that dynamic, even though they are a worse team than some of the others that they faced, with an unknown. Because obviously they've performed well in recent weeks, and maybe they carry that form into this game. But you do not know that. You do not know how they will respond to this change in dynamic, which they have not had to face for a few weeks now, a couple weeks at least. Okay. And I just think that in combination with the fact that you don't know where he's going to play, maybe he goes back to playing in the pivot and Garnacho plays with Ahmad and Haaland up top. And as such, with all these unknowns, I think it's an unnecessary risk. I also think there's a decent spread of output at United. Not too big, but enough whereby it's not something like Haaland at City, right? I just think it's an unnecessary risk to take. If you wish to go there, by all means, like it's your team, do what you want, right? I just think it's an unnecessary risk to accept, but I get it. And this is in relation to Cole Palmer. If you really don't like Palmer, then yeah, I actually wouldn't mind it. I really don't mind it against them too, but I just personally couldn't justify it over Palmer, even if I tried. Moving on to Erling Haaland, I prefer the Bruno captaincy because, again, I think there are certainly some unknowns associated to Haaland, but I would also say there's a lower floor simply because Brentford could line up in a more old school fire at the back, considering the injuries they've got and considering how well that approach has worked for them at times against Erling Haaland. He's also had his struggles against those more compact back threes. And as such, I just personally think Thomas Frank's going to do that. And City's still on in the best of form. Yes, they've won 3 in a row. Yes, they've scored some goals. Obviously, they scored 8 against Salford, 4 against West Ham, 2 against Leicester. But excluding the Salford performance, I don't think the performances were particularly convincing in terms of the ones against Leicester and West Ham, nor do I think defensive dynamic posed by the opposition will be the same that West Ham and Leicester gave them. I think they'll be far more compact in nature. And as such, again, I would personally prefer to go for a Cole Palmer captaincy. I don't think just because you own him, you need to captain him. Practice. But out of the 2, let's just say like you own both of them and you really wanted to go differential, I would go for Bruno Fernandes. Fixture's much better. And I think I can get on board with a Bruno captaincy. Just about, but personally, I can't do so with that. Moving on to what has become a staple piece in solving your problems, benching dilemmas. And this week, there are so many, and there are so many players in Chris Wood, Raul Jimenez, João Pedro, Morgan Rogers, Antoine Semenyo, the Arsenal defence, Anthony Robinson, and more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of the more popular dilemmas, talk about them all individually, a little bit at least, and then you can take what is relevant from there and apply it to your own team. Morgan Rogers versus Chris Wood, I would say, is the most popular one I've seen, and I personally would be starting Morgan Rogers. Firstly, I will say it is slightly close, at least in my opinion. I think it's very difficult for someone to say this person is objectively, without a shadow of a doubt, better than the other option. There's a few variables which are positive for either of them and a few which are negative. What I would say is, if you look at how Man United approached the game against Liverpool, I do not think the Forest approach, regardless of system, will be too dissimilar from that. Thus, they will rely on their transitional threat, right, and their transitions in general, and long distance to score goals. At least as one weapon. They'll have other weapons. They'll have other opportunities in the game crafted through a different. But I think that will be the primary route to goals, right? I would not say, therefore, that those are the best conditions for which Chris Wood could return. Of course, he can score in that manner. I just don't think the probability is particularly high. Then, when you consider how good of a defense Liverpool are, when you consider that he potentially doesn't play 90 minutes in this game, I think if the game's in a state where it's somewhat settled and maybe the scores are level, it's actually a very good game to bring Taiwo one on, someone who is an absolute handful to deal with and offers you a completely different dynamic to Chris Wood. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Wood get hooked around 70. He did so in the first game, and also because he's going to have to run his socks off out off the ball, out of possession, right? So when you take all of those things into consideration, alongside the quality of the Liverpool side and the fact Konate is back, and then you consider how well Rodgers is playing, and he really is in top form at the moment. And everything, take the fixture away for example, everything else is pointing to him returning on a very regular basis now. It seems like he's more comfortable and confident in and around the box. He's certainly added output to his game in some sense. Like, you just look at the difference between 6-7 games where he looked a little bit more raw, but he seems very much settled in those positions now and confident as well. And yeah, okay, fine. Everton away is not the greatest picture, but certainly somewhere where he can do damage. And without Deitch, I don't think they'll be good defensively. So again, it's close, but with Rodgers' form and the fixture that Wood's got, I'm going to go Morgan Rodgers. Similarly, I'm going Rodgers over João Pedro. I obviously explained that in my team selection. Ruter's injured. Minter's injured. So even if João Pedro starts, if they don't have the greatest of starts to the game, and they don't have the greatest of 60 minutes, first 60 minutes, they don't have as much firepower coming off, both of whom came off the bench against Arsenal to cause problems. And I think it'll be harder for Brighton to access a certain level of performance as a result. Reduce expected minutes? Probably, because if he had a scan, he's probably not 100%. So let's say he starts. Well, I imagine he gets subbed off, especially given Fabian Hertz is so big on player welfare. He really is. Think about the first game of the season. Put him into it. Nope, you're getting hooked, and then he didn't play the next. I think. And what if he comes off the bench? What if he's just fit enough for like 20 minutes, just ease him back in? What you want, especially when Rodgers is a very good asset. And some of you would have been burned by this decision. I personally think to trust Rodgers here, I would bench Jimenez. I think West Ham will be in a 5-3-2, 5-4-1, compact block off the ball. Not the best conditions for Jimenez. His expected minutes normally reside around like 70 on average as well. I think I would just take Antoine Semenyo's minutes as a result. And honestly, I think Chelsea away might be a better fixture to score goals than West Ham away if Potter's back five is to be a very compact one. They're out of possession. And lastly, Arsenal defence and Robinson. I think Spurs are going to score. I also think West Ham are going to score, to be honest with you. That's not great. What I would say, though, is with Gabriel, I think in most cases you have to play him just because Spurs aren't great at defending set pieces. Albeit Kinski will certainly be an upgrade on Vicario in that sense, but I still think Gabriel poses enough threat whereby you would want him in the side. It's not the end of the world if you're going to bench him. I think in some cases it's fine. I even suggested that to someone yesterday. But playing double Arsenal defense, that's where I think it gets a little bit risky. I would happily bench Timber for Robinson, even though I think West Ham's going to, just to spread the risk and the fact that Robinson still got attacking upside. If you have Raya, then I would still play Gabriel and go for that. If it is Arsenal, if it is Raya, if it is Timber Gabriel, I would bench Tim. Or if it is Saliba Gabriel, I would be benching Saliba. I think if you have a strong enough defense, then you can bench Robinson. Albeit, I don't think it's the end of the world if you have to start him. The midfield category is the most volatile one at the moment, with many potential outgoings, including, but not limited to, Foden, Diaz, Jota, Martinelli, Semenyo, and Sarr. And Bruno, Fernandes, Brian Mbeumo, Anthony Gordon, Eze, and Sarr are all on the menu for those managers looking to take some of those players out. Seldom is it the case that one player is on both sides of the coin, but such is FPL at times. Going back to what I said initially in the first section of the video, I still think there is more upside associated to double gaming 24 weeks after and having an optimal team for that period, as opposed to being a little bit trigger happy now and taking the upside you get with Southampton at home or Leicester away. Foden, Diaz, Martinelli, Semenyo, and Sarr for this week are all fine in terms of expected minutes. Diaz is performance dependent. If he has a really good first 60, is lot going to hook him? Probably not. But at least he's going to get the nod to start, right? Or at least you expect him to start. You very much expect him to start. Foden will start, and James McAtee probably comes on because obviously he played very well against Leicester, gets the hat-trick against Salford. But it could very much be the case that De Bruyne gets hooked. You want more legs in the middle. I think Foden provides you with that, just given De Bruyne's current fitness status at the moment, and McAtee comes on the right-hand side. So who knows? Maybe we get Foden at 10. Martinelli's got a good game at home to Spurs. Okay, fine. He's not someone who's been setting the world alight at the moment, but he's been doing all right, and the goal threats certainly there to a greater extent in comparison to when Saka was playing. It's the menu I already discussed earlier. I think Chelsea were fine, even with Bournemouth. The fact they don't have a 9. He's still a quality player. And also, he seems to me like someone who functions a little bit in reverse. He actually has a liking for some of the better sides in the league and scoring against them. And then Ismail Assar, I mean, it's Leicester away, right? And he's looked good. Okay, fine, he hasn't been returning as much, but he's looked good, so I see why you'd sell him. But personally, I think unless you have really, really strong conviction, or it's really not going to affect your plan down the line, and it's not going to put you in a situation where you have reduced options down the line, I would not be making transfers like this to go from a good to a potentially very good asset for this week. Even selling someone like Phil Foden, right? He has Ipswich at home, Ipswich away next week. That's better than what Bruno has, in my opinion. That's better than what Eze has, and Gordon, and Brian and Mbeumo. So I would just be a little bit careful making these type of moves. Going on to the potential incomings, though, Bruno, I've obviously spoken about and everything you need to know. And similarly with Eze and Sarr, I just wanted to touch on Brian Mbeumo and Anthony Gordon. Obviously, in everything you need to know, I said that they were good buys, and they are. In isolation, they absolutely are. What I would say is this week, Brian Mbeumo has City at home, and a lot of things in terms of City's point to the fact that this should be a decent. However, I still think you must have some respect for Manchester City at least, and the quality that the individuals boast. Do you really need him for this week? Is this really the best week to sell Martinelli for him when he has Spurs at home, which is a nice stylistic fit anyway? I don't think so. And with Gordon, I don't think Wolves at home is the best fixture for him, for reasons discussed in the captaincy section with relation to Isak in everything you need to know. So I do think you could hold fire, see how things develop. Okay, accept a little bit less upside for this week, but potentially expose yourself to more down the line with more options through transfers. That's just my opinion. I wouldn't really be making too many of these moves. But in isolation, the players are all fine, all the ones I listed to bring in. But I don't think the sells are strong sells. Finally, Wildcard 21 for those of you who have asked. Now, I would say that this doesn't really seem like an optimal time to wildcard at all. And I really dislike wildcarding at this time. I think it makes much more sense to wildcard later in the season where you can pair it with the chips and maximize your upside from there. However, if you were to do so, the plan with this team is basically to extract as much value from Palace, specifically their attack, in the short term. And then once the double has passed, to take out Trent, because the fixture run definitely becomes a bit harder, and move Sarr to like a Brian and Mbeumo, potentially even sell Anthony Gordon ahead of that blank in game week 29 and fixture swing in 26, and restructure like that. So it would mainly be Trent, Sarr, and Gordon out, and then Mateta not so long after that as well. And then apart from that, the team is very template. You may wonder why I've chosen Mateta and Jackson. I think the rest is largely self-explanatory. I just think the fixtures are really good for Jackson at the moment, stylistic standpoint, across like the medium term compared to what others have. And I'm still not convinced that he's not going to come good. And then Mateta, I spoke about it quite a lot in everything you know, so I would go and check that out and point to that. Those are pretty much all the reasons. But I think there's enough upside associated in the next 3 weeks at least, whereby he's worth the punt over someone like Chris Wood or a Johan Wissa or a João Pedro. And in this particular structure, you can afford that. Now, you will notice there's no 0.0 in the bank, and I also have a very high team value in excess of 105 million. So what I would say is, if you aren't feeling Mateta, that's probably the best way to get money out of the side. You can also go Sarr to Eze if you prefer him as such, then maybe go Mateta down to a Wood or a João Pedro. And I imagine a lot of you will like both of those assets. So that's the one change I would make if you can't afford the team. That is all she wrote for Game Week 21's content, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider dropping a like on the video. 300 likes is the target for this video, which we achieved last time around, and for that I am very grateful. I wish you the best of luck for this game week. It should be a very interesting one. I really do hope it goes well for you. I shall see you very shortly for transfer plans, considering a quick turnaround. And until then, good luck and goodbye.